Bounces, caught! Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
I bet you didn't think that was going to happen, but on this podcast, we could have known because we have beginner's luck.
Do you want to predict the craziest moments in sports? Do you want to make money? Everyone does. Then look no further than the Beginner's Luck podcast. Welcome into the Beginner's Luck podcast. With me is Jordan Climbs. I'm Javani Alcantar. We're excited to get to another round of sports betting to help you guys out. But before we start off, I want to give you a little bit of information about ourselves. Jordan, tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, something really interesting about this podcast is that it gives a more beginner's perspective, as it says in the name. And so I'm just starting to get into the sports betting business, trying to learn it all. So I will be in the same process as a lot of you listening to this, as Giovanni helps break us down through all the rest of this.
Absolutely. And just to give you a little bit of my background when it comes to sports betting, I like to do some research on my stuff from time to time, look at different trends, look at different numbers as to how certain teams are doing, go a little bit beyond just what the final score of the game will be. One of my favorite bets to place is NBA first basket bets, especially with the NBA playoffs right now. Last night, I actually just hit Devin Booker plus 420. That's a real stat right there. I won about $10 off it. So just going outside of what the line of the game is going to be and what the final score is going to be is kind of my little niche. But before we get to actual bets, just talking about how sports betting has grown so much, especially in the last few years. It's become legalized on apps in the last few years. As of early 2023, 33 states and the District of Columbia have legalized sports betting, and there's been a 75% increase as of last year in 2022. And there's a lot of money in sports betting, obviously, a lot of money being lost, but these companies like FanDuel, DraftKings, Caesars Sportsbook, you name it, they're making a lot of money, and it looks like right now in the industry by 2028, they're going to be making about $10 billion. So, Jordan, like I said, there's a lot of money to be had here, and it's a very big and growing industry.
Yeah, as you said, it's being popularized in a lot of new states, and I think that's really interesting just to see the growth of it from that perspective. But everyone's watching sports, and so it's really an easy way to make money because everyone's watching and everyone wants to throw their hat in the ring and try to get some bets, win some money. It's very fun to do. Whether you win or lose, of course, it's less fun when you do end up losing, but it's a process that makes it really fun. So with that being said, let's get betting.
All right, so if you're anything like how I was a few months ago, when you hear people talk about it all the time, like, oh, I took this team plus 300, I took this team minus 120, you're probably like, what the heck do those numbers mean? What does it mean if I take a team with those numbers? Well, let's just break it down. So let's just say that tonight I had, let's just say the Memphis Grizzlies minus 140. If I place a $50 bet, I would make about $35.71 on that, and you would have to bet at least $1.40 to make money off of that bet. So if you want to make more money, obviously you look at things like on FanDuel and on DraftKings, you look at the different boosts they'll have of things like that, so where they'll be like, for example, I think last night I saw a boost of if you took all of the favorites in last night's games, because basically every team was a heavy favorite, the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Suns. If you took all the favorites, normally it would be just about minus 200, which is insane betting on 3 games. But I saw a boost yesterday that boosted it up to plus 100. So getting into that, if let's just say you bet on a line that was plus 120 and you place a $75 bet, you would get up to $90 for said bet. Not saying that you should place that amount of money on things. I'm just doing random numbers, but that's just kind of the basis of things that you can bet on. And it's not just betting on who's going to win the game, whether it's a favorite or betting them plus odds. You can also bet on the spread of the game. So just to break it down for you, this is the way it was kind of explained to me. I'm sure there's many different ways you can explain it. But let's say in an NFL game that the Bears are playing the Texans, for example. If the Texans are minus 3-point favorites, you're basically betting that if the game started and the Texans had a 3-point lead, would you still take them to win the game? Or if you want to break it down even more simply, will they win it by 3 or more points? Now, if they win by exactly 3, it's just a push and you get your money back. And also, most bets in the NFL and most sports are going to be plus 3.5 or have to it because most of the time sports books don't like those bets that just push. So when you get into spreads of games, that's especially when you got to do your research. You got to do the most research because especially when you get to like college basketball season, it's really frustrating when it's plus 4.5 and you have a team that's about, let's just say like 20-10 against the spread and they lose by 5 points. That's when it starts to get really frustrating. But for me, for example, my strategy, I don't really like to bet on spreads too much because most of the time I'm betting what are going to be close games, and you have to spend a little bit more money if you want to just bet on who the underdog is or who the favorite is. But in my opinion, I think there's more money to be won in that category. But Jordan, as someone who I know is a little bit newer to this than me, I guess my rundown of that, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, maybe just a couple of questions for you. So
Yeah.
last thing you mentioned, and I think it's something that it's a word that a lot of people can kind of understand, but maybe trying to put it in context. You mentioned underdogs and favorites. So can you just break that down for us a little bit? It could be kind of obvious, but for those who don't know.
Sure. So if there's a minus next to the name, so just looking at some of the bets that we have tonight, the Grizzlies are minus 180 against the Los Angeles Lakers tonight. So they're the favorites to win tonight, obviously. And then if you look at the Lakers, they're plus 146. And then check that the Grizzlies are minus 174. So that's a pretty close line. It's really a game that could go either way. But for example, if you felt more comfortable, I think the Lakers are going to cover 4 points. So if they lose by 2 points, for example, you would still win your bet. But if you didn't feel comfortable saying, oh, I don't want to take them plus 146 because I don't know if they're going to win, but I definitely don't think they're going to lose by more than 4, that's when it starts to get a little bit tricky. I think a better example of this is tonight, or when you look at a series like the Knicks and Cavaliers, Knicks plus 5.5 point dogs on the road. I think I would feel much more comfortable saying I think the Knicks can lose by less than 5.5 on the road than saying they're going to beat Cleveland in Cleveland. And if you want even more examples, Heat Bucks tonight, the Heats are 12 plus or plus 12 underdogs. To be honest, just looking at that without doing any research, I'd feel pretty comfortable taking that. They have a lead in the series right now, even though it's at Milwaukee. I think I don't think at all I would feel comfortable taking Milwaukee minus 12 or minus 620. And I think also, just going back to your original question, when a team is minus 620, most of the time you're not going to place a bet on that because of how much money you have to place to begin with to win that. Usually, if I'm going to place something like that, I would put it in a parlay, for example, saying Lakers plus 146 and Bucks minus 620. So that's kind of the long-winded breakdown of that.
Yeah. Well, last thing you just said, you mentioned parlays, and a new word that you introduced to me a couple of days ago was boosts. I didn't really know what that was. And so when you were describing to me, it kind of sounded like the same thing, but there is a difference there. So can you explain the difference between a parlay and a boost in sports betting?
Absolutely. So I'll start with a boost. So just looking at what FanDuel has tonight, they usually have a bunch of different boosts. So actually, I'll start with the parlay first. So for example, there's a lot of different things that you could do. You could parlay different results. Really, you can go as long as you want. If you wanted to bet that, for example, I think I saw someone won like Argentina to win the World Cup. They have like the Bucks to win the NBA title, and then they had the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. You can do as long-winded as that. I personally don't really have the patience to really do that. I kind of like to see stuff right away. But then also you could do tonight, FanDuel has some parlays they already have for you. For example, tonight, LeBron to record plus 4 assists to get 6 plus rebounds, Anthony Davis to get 4 plus assists, and then Austin Reeves to score plus 20 points. To be honest, I don't really like to place those a lot because they actually do a lot of research on things. And while all those look pretty enticing, oh man, plus 1,453. If I place $10 on it, I'll win $145. In theory, sounds great. All those numbers I don't think are unrealistic, but I think they've done enough research to say that all those happening are pretty unlikely, and they'll just make it look enticing for people. So just got to be careful. I'm not saying to never place those, but the sports books are pretty strategic when it comes to that. And see, right now, so a boost that they have for tonight is LeBron James and Giannis to each record a double-double. It was plus 120. With this boost, it makes it plus 200. So it makes it way more enticing for people that maybe would just have a parlay like that to begin with, to maybe say, okay, you know what, plus 200, those are pretty good odds. I think I'm going to take it. And then if you want to look at another sport, I know we've talked NBA a lot. Another one they have is for soccer, Man City today to win and both teams to score versus Arsenal. That would normally be at plus 200. With this boost, it adds it to plus 300. So it might not sound like too much in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that can make a bet way more enticing for the average person.
So basically, a boost is it's basically like a built-in parlay by the sportsbook, but then you can kind of win more money. However, the sportsbook is trying to trick you in that sense because, as you said, they've done the research, and so they're trying to make money for themselves, right? They're trying to gain money and make their people lose their bets so that they can get the profit from it. And you talked a lot about sportsbook. I think you're a FanDuel guy, right? Is that what you're on? So
yes.
For those who don't know, break down the different sports books, what's the difference between them, and how you decipher how you found FanDuel to be the one that you are rolling with.
Yeah, so FanDuel, honestly, it was just the one I saw the most about. It was the one most of my friends had used, so I just picked it up. But what I really like about FanDuel is just how easy it is to use and how right away when you get to the home screen, it kind of knows, or you don't have to dig through most things. It'll kind of recognize what you like to bet on. So, for example, as someone who doesn't watch the NHL very much, nothing against it at all, but I have to scroll down pretty far to see the NHL. So I know in a lot of sports books, it'll just promote what they want you to bet on. Instead, it kind of recognizes your patterns. But I have dabbled a little bit with other sports books. BetMGM is what I used when I was out of the state for a little bit, just to kind of mess around with it. It is actually the fastest growing sports book in the country. I also thought it was pretty easy to use. I didn't think there was any glaring issues with it. I think they also have some pretty good boost. And really, I think any sports book now will be good. I have not used this one personally, but I've read a little bit about it. And I know the Chicago White Sox promote it all the time on their broadcast. PointsBet, they emphasize a lot on their parlays and actually have like a whole tab dedicated to just quickly building parlays. So in my experience, I don't like to do I usually, if I'm going to have a night where, okay, I'm going to sit down and we'll watch sports for a few hours, I'm usually only going to do one parlay. I know people who will do 3 or 4 parlays per night. And for me, I think that's just an easy way to get really frustrated and lose a lot of money. To be honest, I haven't won too many parlays. But yeah, I mean, any sportsbook that you see now, everything's been kind of fleshed out. Everything's going to be pretty much the same. There's not going to be any massive differences between any of them. But yeah, I think they're all good. Personally, I'm a FanDuel guy, but I don't have anything against DraftKings or Caesar Sportsbook.
Well, while we have a little bit of time, let's get into kind of a fun bet that we could find just so we could, incorporate ourselves into a breakdown of strategies that we have when trying to make a bet so that all these terms that we've talked about can kind of be explained a bit and put into action. So, Giovanni, what's a bet that we can talk about right now and kind of break down?
Well, I'm kind of to be honest, I wasn't fully aware of how betting for the NFL draft really worked up until about a week ago. Right now, Bryce Young's the favorite at minus 2,000, or to go number 1, I should say, which is kind of crazy because I feel like a while ago when I looked at that, he had at least plus odds. I don't remember how much, but I mean, I think it would be pretty interesting to take CJ Stroud plus 2,500. I mean, I think I know at this point that Bryce Young, to most people, is the consensus number 1 overall pick for the Panthers, but I'm not really seeing a whole lot from anyone from the Panthers, whether it's any beat reporter or anything saying that, oh yeah, Bryce Young's their guy. I'm sure in the next day or two we're going to hear something about it. So I would explain why the odds are like that. But I think CJ Stroud at plus 2,500 would be pretty interesting. And then Will Levis as well, plus 1,000. And then you start to get to the ridiculous numbers like Will Anderson plus 20,000. I mean, I think you're just gifting money to the sports book if you place that. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. I think it starts to get more fascinating when you look at the number 2 pick as well. The favorite on FanDuel is actually Tyree Wilson right now for the Houston Texans, which...
That's an interesting one, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I would think if they're not going to go quarterback, they would go Will Anderson. So at plus 380, you got Stroud at plus 550 as well. I'm of the belief that they're going to take a quarterback with the number 2 pick, especially if for some reason Bryce Young doesn't go number 1. But I've also seen that Bryce Young's their guy, and they're not big on Stroud or Levis or Anthony Richardson. So I think if they took a non-quarterback, it would be Will Anderson. Man, I've stuck Tyree Wilson at plus 150. That's really interesting. I don't know if you had any more on that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, these books, they kind of have some insider information, and so it makes you question, do they know something? I don't know if there is like a leak that would come out that they would put Wilson as the top guy in that category. But yeah, it's very interesting. I haven't seen that anywhere else, and it's really not something that I thought about. I thought it was going to be quarterback or Will Anderson, just trying to take the best player on the board. So yeah, like you said, we'll see if they know something we don't, and they'll try to trick us. The NFL draft is always very tough to predict, and so it's fun to bet on it, but it can be frustrating at times.
I personally have never bet on the NFL draft, so this will be the first time. I don't know how crazy I'll try and go for it, to be honest. I feel like I just kind of want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just looking a little bit at the number 4 pick, my beloved Indianapolis Colts. I hate that Will Levis is the favorite at plus 30, but whatever, we can move on.
Yep. All right, well, I think that should just about wrap it up for this podcast. So thank you all for listening, and well, it's fun to hear about the popularity of sports betting growing, and we hope that you learned a lot about the basics of betting today. I know I sure learned a lot. So make sure to get involved in sports betting if you want to. You can do it with some friends. Find a book that you love and just bet and have fun, but of course, be safe while doing it.
Also, make sure to follow our social media. Again, thank you for listening. Find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at the Beginner's Luck Podcast. Hope you enjoyed listening to us today. I've been Javai Alcantara alongside Jordan Climbs. Thank you for listening, and remember, get betting.